Go down it on the mountain, over the hills and everywhere. Go down it on the mountain, that Jesus Christ is born. And when I was a seeker, I sought both night and day. I asked the Lord to help me, and He showed me the way. Go down it on the mountain, over the hills and everywhere. Go down it on the mountain, that Jesus Christ is born. He is born. Jesus Christ the King is born. He is born.
Wow, Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas.
Doesn't that put you in the Christmas spirit?
Oh, definitely. I love listening to Heavenly Melodies Christmas music.
Right.
I just love listening to Christmas music.
That's
in general.
true. So we have the same panel that we had yesterday. We got ready for Christmas. We have,
Linda, Merry Christmas.
And Joe, Merry Christmas to you.
and Doris, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year coming up. Okay.
That's right.
Well, let's get started on the lesson day. What are we going to be talking about Christmas Day?
Christmas Day, we're going into the story of Jesus being born. We're going to talk about Mary and Joseph and what they experienced, as well as the shepherds that witnessed, that star where Jesus was born, and being able to just better understand the Christmas story.
Well, I think we'll have a few songs because there's been so many beautiful songs written with the Christmas story in them. And I think that's also a good way to tell the story, don't you, Linda?
Oh, definitely. Like Christmas music and Christmas go hand in hand.
Okay, so let's start out our story today by reading a little bit about what happened. Now, if you read the lesson yesterday, you knew that Mary and Joseph, they had to go to Bethlehem and so forth. Let's read about it today. Are you ready to start?
Yes.
All right, we're going to read now on page 38, starting here at the first column and writing down through line 17.
After Mary and Joseph's harrowing journey to Bethlehem, where they are going to take part in a census, the young displaced couple search in vain for shelter. Their lives reek of suspicion and scandal, and they end up having the baby in a manger. For Luke's first century audience, a birth in a manger, where the animals live, the lowest of low places, means two things. First, from a human perspective, the odds are clearly against Mary, just like the odds are against them. But secondly, Joseph and Mary beat the odds. A Savior is born, and God's promises are true. As the divine light bearer, Jesus makes his entrance into the world. All conventional thinking is shattered in an instant. At the same time, good news will be announced to those who, from society's perspective, need it the most.
Well, Linda, I think a lot of people have heard this story before, but some of you might not have. And Mary and Joseph, they had to go this long trip. Why do they call it a harrowing journey?
Well, because it was a long and difficult journey, and it was very tiring because it was such a long distance they had to go. And back then, they didn't have automobiles or trains or...
The donkeys.
They had donkeys, yes, on an animal, but I can't imagine riding on a donkey is very comfortable, especially if you have to go a long distance.
Especially if you're pregnant. You can have
Exactly.
a baby. Isn't that true?
More so.
Well, and they're going to take part in a census, and they had to go from where they were living to their hometown, right?
Right. And so here, census, where they're counting the population, and in order to do that, you have to go to where you're originally from, not where you're living at the moment.
And of course, everybody then was traveling, and there was no room in these hotels or inns, they called them in those days. And they tried to find a place, but they couldn't find any place.
Right, and so they end up having the baby in a manger.
Okay, now they call them a displaced couple, but it's not so much they were displaced, but they were just people who couldn't find a place to stay. That was the main thing, wasn't it?
Right. And it's funny, in Christmas time, especially in North America, I feel like this story is still true today. You go traveling somewhere for Christmas and everything's booked. It's hard to find a place to
Even
stay.
the airplanes.
Right. Yeah.
Everything, yeah.
Or Chinese New Year.
Oh,
that
that's-
happened to me one time. I was
Always.
traveling, or actually cycling, and we didn't have a place booked, and everywhere was booked because it was Chinese New Year
Yeah, that's
holiday.
right.
Did
On
you
these
end up in a
holidays.
staple?
Yeah.
We almost thought we had to sleep in the yard, the schoolyard, but thankfully someone came to our rescue.
Be sure
Actually,
and get
somebody
your
from here.
reservation in this year early, okay?
Yes.
But they looked in vain, which means they couldn't find anything. No matter how much they looked, they couldn't find any place to sleep. And actually, some people probably wondered about them. It says that their lives were reeked with suspicion and scandal. I don't know if people knew too much about them. Because when you're traveling, there's all these people going around, and I don't think everybody knew that much about them. Do you?
Yeah, not necessarily.
No, not necessarily. But, people knew that she was pregnant, that's for sure.
Right, and they're a very young couple.
Sure. And so then they ended up by going to a place where the man says, well, I don't have any room, but if you want to, you could sleep out there in the manger. Now, you grew up on a farm, Joe, and I did too. And actually, sometimes we used to sleep out in the barn on the hay. That was kind of fun. Did you ever do that?
I did, actually. We'd have all the hay bales. We'd stack them up in the barn. It was
And
great.
we'd tell stories at night and sleep. Did you do that too?
Yeah. Oh, it was a lot of fun.
So I don't think, staying in a manger would be so bad in that sense.
Yeah, but maybe having a baby in a manger.
Yeah, that's different. Yeah. It's but for fun staying in a manger, isn't it? And the hay smells pretty good at night.
I like
sometimes.
hay.
But anyway, they found that wasn't a good place to have a baby. That's true. But then they did have their baby, and I'm glad they had a place inside. They had a shelter to have the baby, aren't you?
Right. Yeah. At least they had some place to be. They weren't out in the open.
Right.
But it was a low place to be. Here it's described as the lowest of low places.
Right. Nobody would try to go and stay in a place like that, you wouldn't try to book a manger, right?
Right. And, yesterday, Doris, you were talking about how Jesus coming was supposed to be in people's mind, coming as a king, coming in a palace.
In a palace.
But here, Jesus comes in a manger, as Linda was describing, the lowest of low places. And so, Zach, the author here, is talking about how for Luke's audience, they understand that, Mary was in a very rough place.
Right. Well, and that's why it says that here, that from a human viewpoint or perspective, the odds were against Mary. She has no place to have the baby. It's like she's not going to win, right?
Right. It's a very difficult situation.
But they beat the odds. They got through it anyway, and she had the baby. It worked out okay, and the baby was born. Wow.
Right. And it says that God's promises are true.
A Savior is born, and God's promises are true. That reminds me of a Christmas carol that Heavenly Melody sings. Let's have one more Christmas carol. What do you think?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
There's one called Mary's Boy Child. Let's hear that one now.
Long time ago in Bethlehem, so the Holy Bible says, Mary's boy child, Jesus Christ, was born on Christmas Day. The shepherds watched their flocks by night. They saw a bright new shining star and heard a choir from heaven sing. The music came from afar. Hark, now hear the angels sing. A new king's born today, and man will live forevermore because of Christmas Day. Now Joseph and his wife Mary, they came to Bethlehem that night. They found no place to bear her child. Not a single room was in sight. Hark, now hear the angels sing. A new king's born today, and man will live forevermore because of Christmas Day. Trumpets sound and angels sing. Listen to what they say.
Listen to what they say.
And man will live forevermore because of Christmas Day. Now hear the angels sing. A new king's born today, and man will live forevermore because of Christmas
Isn't that beautiful? And you feel the Christmas spirit when you hear Christmas songs.
Oh, yes, definitely.
And you know, as a divine light bearer, well, as Jesus came into the world, he said, as the song said, and man will live forevermore because of Christmas Day. What a message.
Right. That's such a powerful message, and we often describe it as being good news, good news to all men.
And so that really what it says here, this people thinking about what that meant. Your conventional thinking was just a baby, but that's shattered in an instant when you think about the fact that this was not just a baby. This was God's son who came into the world, and that kind of really shatters your mind to think of it.
Right. It's such an amazing, amazing miracle. We use this sort of word to
That's
describe
true.
Christ coming.
Yeah. And the world really needed that, didn't they?
Oh, yes, and especially to whom he appeared to the first time, or the people who saw him first. They really needed hope.
Right. And so one of the things we're going to be talking about are some of the first few people to visit Jesus, which were the shepherds.
That's true, right. And the shepherds, how did the shepherds know where to go? Remember? What did we say yesterday?
There was a star in the sky and an angel who directed them to the place of Jesus' birth.
And the announcement was made to the shepherds by the angel because they didn't know what was going on. They didn't know about what the star was for, but they said, to you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, well, Christ the Lord. Isn't that's what the angel said in the sky? Wow, wouldn't that have been great to be there and hear the angel say that?
Right, such an exciting moment. And the idea that, again, Jesus being born in a manger, and the first people who get to see it aren't the up and in,
No.
people who have a lot of power, but shepherds, kind of
Right.
people that are a little lower in society and out in the wilderness.
Well, sometimes people think about shepherds as maybe more uneducated and so forth because probably they weren't the ones that were the lawyers in town and the tax collectors and all. And actually, in our article here, the next day, they're saying something here in the next paragraph about the scoundrels. And I'm not sure that all of the shepherds were really scoundrels. Maybe some of them were. A scoundrel is kind of a person that's kind of like a lil mong, right?
Right. Untrustworthy, maybe
Yeah.
a dubious character. But maybe they had this reputation. Not that they were,
Right.
scoundrels, but maybe they were seen to some people as scoundrels.
Yeah, what do you think?
I think that's quite a possibility. I mean, we have really interesting stories in the Bible about shepherds. And we think of, if you're ever interested in reading more about King David, that was a king who
Well, that's
used
true.
to be a shepherd.
Well, and besides that, in history, we read a lot of stories about heroic shepherds who gave their life for their sheep. They saved them when the wolves came and stuff. So I kind of think of shepherds as, as not being scoundrels too much. But let's read what it says anyway. Are you ready for the next paragraph? Let's
Yes.
read the next section.
The scoundrels. Later in Luke's gospel, readers come across a dispossessed people who have lost their societal privilege, the shepherds. During the first century, the image of the shepherd is bleak. Shepherds were removed from polite society because they went against general social expectations and, as a result, were left spending their days among unclean sheep. And yet, as an angel comes to announce Jesus' birth, among these scoundrels, in the depths of the night, a radiance is born. Luke's gospel reaches its climax here, reminding the readers that the only place a great radiance can be born is in the depths of darkness.
Well, in this article, they mentioned the fact that in some places, shepherds were kind of talked about, as not being very well educated, and the image wasn't maybe that good.
Right. Maybe they were outcasts in society because they were out
Not
there.
all of them, probably.
Well, yeah. Maybe at this time, they were seen as less. But nowadays, we have a more positive view of shepherds, I think,
Well,
because
right. They
they're
even talk about Jesus
protectors.
being
Yes.
the shepherd, taking care of us, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
the
we have
good shepherd, right?
a good image of shepherds.
Right, and so I think that's why the sentence here, that during the first century, the image of the shepherd is bleak, not very hopeful. Whereas now, when we say shepherd, a lot of us think of a very positive image.
Right. Well, we think of mentors, people that take care of other people.
Right,
They're
you
kinda like
shepherd people.
shepherds, right? And so we think about the good shepherds and so forth. But anyway, the angels announced that Jesus was born to these shepherds. And it was kind of like we talk about radiance. I mean, here's something bright in the sky. The shepherds must have been really shocked when this happened. What's happening?
Right. I imagine that they would be scared, like seeing this bright light and this angel in the sky. So maybe their immediate reaction was shock and fear. But then...
Right, but then to have such an amazing announcement of, don't be afraid, there's actually something incredible happening and you get to be a part of this moment.
Well, that's true. And so that was where the kind of the radiance came. At that time, there was this light in the sky and the voices and singing good news. And wow, that would have been great. It's too bad they didn't have TV to capture that.
I know, couldn't record it.
But maybe someday we'll get to hear the angels again. I hope so. Because they came down to bring the good news that man shall live forevermore because of Christmas Day. So actually, we can have our own shepherd in a sense. What do you think?
That's right. And so we're going to be reading a little bit more about this as we continue talking about our shepherd friends. Our own shepherd. In fact, the only place this radiance can be born in us is in the place of our own shepherd. That place where we feel so raw and unworthy, and where we intensely feel the darkness and void within. Luke's Christmas story is a reminder to us all. It's in our own dark places that we see our need for this new radiance.
Well, in the earlier paragraph, the last sentence, we read that the only place the great radiance can be born is in the depths of darkness. And that is true because a light, no matter how dull or bright it is, it always seems more radiant and brighter when it's in a dark place.
Well, that's true. They say, the candle shines brighter when it's in the dark.
And, actually, in a lot of churches, when they celebrate Christmas, they'll have a candlelight service.
That's right. They
And
will.
that's always so wonderful.
Yeah.
And you think of a candle, it's so small, but, they shut off all the lights in the church and they light up that candle and it just shines really brightly surrounded by all that darkness.
Well, there's a lot of people in the world today that kind of seem that they don't have hope. I read about homeless people in America and other countries, and some people are worried about the future. So, in a sense, there's a lot of darkness in the world, and we need something to shine to kind of take care of the worries that we have in our life. And I think this idea of Christmas lights this hope in everybody, no matter what their situation.
Right. And so no matter how dark or how bad a situation seems, there's a very definite light that can shine hope into that situation. And I think that can be an encouragement to all of our listeners, especially on Christmas Day.
Exactly. We always have hope, and the birth of Christ, we're reminded every year, and we can say every day, right, that it's a source of hope for us.
Right. We all have our own dark places, and the world certainly has a lot of them, but then we see the need for this. But if we look to the fact that Jesus came down to tell us some wonderful news, that he has prepared a place in heaven for us, and we can go there, wow, that takes away that darkness, and it gives us a hope for the future.
That
Doesn't
it
it?
does.
Yeah. So I think that's the main thing about Christmas, is knowing that Jesus came into the world to give us peace and joy and hope. And we can't live without these things.
No, we cannot.
So I think in closing, we can think about that as we hear Christmas songs, and you hear music, we hear the bells. We're going to end up with a Christmas carol. I heard the bells on Christmas Day. And remember what the carols sing. The news that Jesus came into the world to give us hope and peace and love. Isn't that wonderful?
That is.
Yes.
So let's listen to this last song about I Heard the Bells of Christmas Day.
I heard the bells on